Good evening, everyone. Oh, great. Thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Sipowicz. I'm the chairperson of the Coalition of Kingston Communities, which, as you probably know, is an umbrella organization of over 25 community groups with diverse interests, not necessarily similar or consistent interests even, except for one thing: we all advocate for transparency and accountability at City Hall. And in that capacity, we thought it was very important to have all candidates meetings in all districts. And in the case of some districts, there are not active community organizations or organizations with the resources to muster their own all candidates meetings. So we decided to do it on behalf of the residents of those districts. And we're doing it on Zoom. We did this at the last municipal election, but they were all in-person meetings. And last time it was tremendously successful with over 1,000 people participating. And it's been great to see that this alternative format has been working very well too. So thank you very much, everyone, for plugging in. Thank you very much to the candidates for stepping up and meeting the public. And I should also give a shout out to Mark, our tech guy, who's been just a wizard and a godsend to make sure that the ship stays afloat. So thank you, Mark. All right, well, without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished moderator, David Gordon, a colleague of mine at Queen's. He's professor and former director of the School of Urban and Regional Planning at Queen's. His latest research compares the history of planning suburbs in Canada, Australia, and the United States. He keeps an eye on current development plans in Kingston and further afield. And Dave has lived in Kingston for over 30 years and favors his bicycle for getting around town. So thank you very much, Dave. I'll hand it over to you, and everyone have a wonderful meeting. I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Christine, and thanks for the invitation from the folks from Meadowbrook-Strathcona. And I want to thank everybody who's turned on their camera today. It's good to have a few faces while you're talking. It's one of the things we learned with our students in the last 2 years of way too much Zoom. So thanks to the folks who've got their cameras on at least for the beginning while we start. I'm going to go over the rules for the meeting and allow the candidates to introduce themselves. To begin with, each candidate will have 2 minutes, strictly timed by the ruthless moderator. Now I'm getting a new, my daughter has been showing me how the new timer app on my phone works, so we'll see how that goes. To speak, and so you'll have 2 minutes to speak about your background and why you decided to run for council. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order by last name. So Jacob's going to go first. And then I'll ask each candidate to answer a question that we've cooked up. And while we're doing that, and they're going to get 3 minutes each to answer, then we'll be asking for questions from people in the audience. Now, the best way to ask these questions is to type them into the chat box. Now, if everybody's got their Zoom open, down at the bottom, there's a green button, a red button, leave, don't press that one. There's a green button called share screen, and if you drag that a little wider one way or the other, the chat function will show up. If the chat function isn't showing up, press on the little three dots beside the leave button and the chat thing will appear. You can click on that and then you can type a message in there, and Christine's going to keep an eye on it, so am I, and we'll ask questions, questions according to when they came in from the chat. You can also, as we get a little further on, raise your hand, either physically, if you've got your camera on. I'll try and keep an eye, but it would be helpful if you raised your hand in the, there's a smiley face at the bottom beside the called reactions, and you can go in there and raise your hand. Why don't we practice that? So what, for the people who are signed on right now, why don't you find that button to raise your hand and press the raise hand thing, see how that works. If you have the participants box open, you can see all the people's hands going up in there. So that's very helpful when that happens. And then when you're done, you can lower your hand with the little button too, which everybody's doing right now. So that's great. So that's how to make a Zoom meeting work. The chat, I'm really surprised. The chat works so well that people are, if you put your thing in the chat, we'll just ask the question. We won't say who it comes from, because I know a lot of people are kind of nervous about asking questions. So putting it in the chat's the way to get a question in without having to volunteer. All right, so everybody got the rules down straight. So I'm going to try and turn on this app, and where to go? Stopwatch, no. Timer, yes. 2 minutes. Jacob, could you tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to run for council? How about that?
For sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you to the coalition for having me. I'm Jacob Weinperl. I'm 21 years old, and I'm a third-year undergraduate student at Queen's University. My professional background is mainly in childcare and as a direct support professional for individuals with developmental and physical disabilities. A lot of voters have mentioned to me, and you may be thinking it yourself, that I'm fairly young to be running in an election. And while I may be young in comparison to those I'm running against, through my involvement with the Cataraqui Union of Tenants, I've had the ability to see what many other students in Kingston neglect in their day-to-day life. That being the abject poverty, homelessness, and housing precarity that's rampant within our city, which comes as a direct result of the failure of municipal housing policy. When I speak of housing, some things must be made clear. I'm not a career politician talking about this because it's popular. I'm not a friend of landlords or developers who will harp on supply-side trickle-down solutions. What sets myself and the rest of the candidates on the People's Platform for Kingston apart is that we are tenants, and we are working-class people, and we are the ones feeling the brunt of this housing crisis, and we have a vested interest in alleviating the cost of living by putting people before profits. Now, I'm running in this election because my future and my generation's future is at risk. And the more time that goes on, the more people my age are forced to join this fight because the situation becomes more dire with each and every day. The workers, the poor, the unhoused people of the city have heard the words "we can't" from our local politicians innumerable times. And while they haven't been able to help us, they have been able to help the largest landlords and developers increase their bottom line at our expense. Every dollar a landlord or developer makes that they don't work for is a dollar that someone did work for and wasn't allowed to keep. And it's time to end that cycle and build a city for the many and not the few. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you very much, Jacob.
Time that one.
Next up is Michael Murphy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the coalition for organizing the event, and to all the folks who are watching, whether that's live with us on Zoom or the people who will watch the recording. My name is Michael Murphy, and I'm running for my home district of Meadowbrook-Strathcona. I grew up in Balsam Grove and Strathcona Park, and now I live here with my wife, Sarah. I hold a PhD in political science from the University of Ottawa, and I currently work at Queen's in the Department of Political Studies. Since 2018, I've represented our area as a school board trustee, serving as vice chair of the board for Algonquin and Lakeshore, as well as being chair of our audit committee. This means that I have experience reading reports, analyzing budget documents, and reaching decisions by building consensus. My time as a trustee has prepared me to serve on council, and I am ready to work. As your councillor, I will advocate effectively by building consensus around the issues that matter. I'm proud to share that my campaign supporters come from across the political spectrum, including members of the labor, development, and heritage communities in Kingston. Rather than divide into camps and dig in our heels, my approach is to bring together people, project information, city plans and priorities, and find a path forward to get projects moving. In a city facing a major housing crisis, a doctor shortage, rundown and unsafe roads, we need a councillor who can work with others to get things done. And I invite you to be a part of that solution. Join your neighbors on Team Murphy, and let's work together to build a more livable Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And last but not least, Jeff Mclaren.
Thank you. So I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, grew up in Victoria, went to school in Ottawa, lived in Europe and in Korea. And then I moved into Kingston, and this is where I've settled down. I was interested in politics in the beginning because I studied it at university, but also as I came to Kingston, the roads were a lot worse than they are today. And in fact, the road that my mother tended to drive most often tended to hurt her back as a result of the potholes. So that was the very first thing that got me into politics. And it was successful. We fixed a lot of the roads, and we've got a plan now to get them all fixed within the next few years. So that was a major success. But the thing that has evolved for me over time is that people have been coming to me at my local, either at the Chit Chat Cafe in the past or at the Kingston Frontenac, or sorry, at the Kingston Coffee House, to tell me their concerns and their plan and their wishes for from the city. And what has happened was I realized that I can help a lot of people. With my experience on council, I know what is likely to happen, what can be done, what can be massaged, and what can be not done, essentially, and how we can change things. So that has given me a great deal of impetus to try and continue to do this, because I can see that I've made a difference in the past, and I continue to make a difference in people's lives in the district and across the city. That's what brought me to politics.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff, and thanks for finishing on time. So this is the question I'm going to ask all three candidates, just to prime the pump and to encourage. We've now got 23 people online. That's fantastic. Oh, that's not the timer. And, we encourage you to either raise your hand on the participants list, or even better, type a question into the chat. So the question for all three candidates, and you're going to get 3 minutes each to answer this, starting with Mr. Mclaren. And the question is, what's the biggest issue you're hearing from constituents in Meadowbrook-Strathcona? As you're canvassing, and I hear that you all are, you know, what's the biggest issue you're hearing on the doorsteps, and what steps are you going to take to address this concern if you're elected? So Jeff, you're up first, and I'm resetting my timer for 3 minutes now.
Thank you. The biggest issue that I've been hearing is affordability, and it seems to manifest in three different categories. Many people want affordable housing, ability to buy a house that they can afford to live in. The second thing is rents. Many people want to have rents that are also affordable, meaning around 30% of one's income or less. And the third thing that most people want that I've been hearing is they want affordable taxes. They're very afraid of being taxed out of their homes. So these three forms of affordability are what I will be tackling most. With regards to housing affordability, we want to increase the supply of all kinds of houses. And we have set the stage for this already. We have passed a zoning bylaw that allows increased ability to build secondary suites, which allows people to stay in their homes and collect a secondary revenue source to help pay off their mortgages in many cases. But that also helps with rent, because if you increase the supply of rent, you would put downward pressure on rents in general. Now, Kingston also has another secondary problem with regards to rents, is that sometimes there are at least one institution that tends to expand its student population at a faster rate than supply, which causes a difference. So I would also be advocating for Queens to house a higher percentage of their students than they currently do. This would definitely put downward pressure on rents and the ability for more people to actually find better and more desirable rent space. Additionally, these last 4 years have seen the tax base increase by by a faster rate than any time since at least the 1950s. We have put a lot more taxable units on the market, which means that there's greater pressure to keep the taxes low, or the tax rate increases as low as possible. So this affects all three levels of affordability that I've been hearing from the people.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jeff. And I'll reset the clock now. We'll now hear from Michael Murphy. So what's the biggest issue you've been hearing from constituents, and what steps will you take to address the concern if you're elected?
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess bringing up a familiar theme, and I'm sure we'll be doing this through the hot topics all night, but it's roads that I've been hearing the most about at the door, both in terms of road repair, the quality of the roads that we're driving on, and the safety of the roads. People who drive or take the bus down our city and neighborhood streets know that it's time for change in the way that we manage road repairs in Kingston. The current system just isn't working. As I've gone door to door, I've heard how potholes and neglected streets make it impossible for cyclists to find a safe route to work. Don't get me wrong, it's wonderful that we have recreation trails available, but that doesn't help the daily commute. Folks involved in the tourism industry have told me how the disrepair of our downtown roads costs our economy money every single summer. And I've spoken with paramedics who shared the danger and discomfort that their patients experience every time they drive the roads around the hospital. This just isn't working. We need a new system to address road repair in Kingston, with clear targets and community consultation at every turn. But we also have road safety issues. Often in our neighborhoods, this relates to speeding. I have a plan for community safety zones around all schools. While we have seen some first steps in a pilot project, such as the one around St. Paul's and Lord Strathcona, these community safety zones are too small to be fully effective. I believe that community safety zones should be expanded so that kids are not just safe at the school door, but at their front door. We need school safety, and we need park safety, and we need neighborhood community walkability. A larger community safety zone will allow the implementation of automated speed enforcement. This is an advantage over the current system that requires in-person costly police patrols. While we do have some examples of Sergeant Koopman visiting McMahon Avenue and writing 25 tickets in an afternoon, it is not sustainable for 24/7 police enforcement of every school corner. That's not an efficient use of taxpayer dollars.
30 seconds.
Sorry, was that time?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Wonderful. The automated speed enforcement systems have paid for themselves in every community that they've been implemented in, and this will relieve pressures on the revenue side of the city's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and next up, Jacob, what's the biggest issue you're hearing from constituents of Meadowbrook-Strathcona, and what will you do about it if you're elected?
Thanks, Dave. There's no question what people are worried about is housing. The voters I've been talking to have specifically stressed the urgency of the housing crisis for those who are precariously housed, such as those with little to no money left after paying rent, as well as those who are left unhoused. There's no coincidence that every person running in this election is talking about housing. That's because the various organizations, activists, and citizens in Kingston, such as organizations under the umbrella of the Coalition and the Cataraqui Union of Tenants, of which I'm a member, they have brought this to the forefront of politics in Kingston. Again, the difference between myself and those I'm running against when I talk about housing is I'm not engaging in speculation or theory of increasing housing supply, and I'm not merely making platitudes. Rather, as I'm part of a platform that is actually made up of tenants and working people, we are taking our own lived experiences and applying them to what the mass of people in Kingston are demanding, which is truly affordable housing. The mayor and the council have stubbornly stuck to the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation's definition of affordable, which is 80% of the market rate for rent, in their attempt to measure their own policy success. And since most of those on council are homeowners themselves, some even landlords, they find themselves fairly out of touch with the mass of working people and what their affordable would actually mean. Canada has recently accepted a UN declaration making housing a human right in our country. And as far as I can tell, we haven't made the slightest legitimate effort to actually act on this. Housing being a human right implies that it cannot be a commodity bought and sold or speculated upon on the market, but rather that it is something every citizen, regardless of their income, should be provided by the government. What myself and the rest of the candidates on the People's Platform for Kingston will do to solve this housing problem is eliminate homelessness and clear the social housing registry by implementing public rent geared to income housing. This rent geared to income housing doesn't need to be built from scratch by bulldozing over forests and wetlands. There are many vacant buildings, vacant units, and there's ample land left unused or improperly used where we propose rent geared to income housing could begin. In addition, we propose that landlords who are found to be neglectful, abusive, or keeping their properties in disrepair should have their units legally bought up and expropriated by the municipal government and brought under the umbrella of public rent geared to income housing plan. 100% rent geared to income housing is the only way we will alleviate this crisis for those who are worst affected. People
30
before
seconds, Jacob.
profits. Thank you.
Oh, well, okay, thank you. I shouldn't really have hurried you folks along because we don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. Oh, here we go. And I'd encourage people to put questions in the chat or raise their hand virtually, or if your camera's on otherwise, then I'll try and keep notes from things. Here's a couple. And a message, first question about the provincial government's putting through strong mayor legislation that will enable mayors to veto council votes. Is there any issue that might come to council that you think warrants the use of such powers? Would you oppose the use of such powers when its use is contemplated? So that's the provincial government's strong mayor and the mayor being able to veto council decision. So 90 seconds each. And I'm going to start with the middle of the deck this time with Michael, and then Jacob, and then Jeff.
Thank you. I am opposed to the strong mayor proposal. I think that this is, well, I should begin by noting that this is at the moment not being implemented in Kingston. I think that any kind of, overreach of executive power is something that can cause great harm to the democratic process, consultation processes, and the transparency that groups like the Coalition have been fighting for. We need to have that public engagement, and I think Kingston has, in great part, been a good example of what public consultation can look like. Now, while I would like to see greater, consensus building and collaboration between different parts of the community, I think that part of my opposition to the Strong Mayor Initiative is that it blocks that from even happening at the beginning. Thank you. I'll continue the pattern of finishing under time that we all have.
So Jeff and then Jacob.
I too am opposed. I too am opposed to the strong mayor proposal. It is most certainly undemocratic. It reduces the democratic power of, I guess, council or each individual council. It makes council essentially redundant, making one person have a disproportionate amount of power, where the best forms of government tend to diffuse power amongst the greatest number. And this is centralizing power. So I'm very much against it.
Thank you. And Jacob?
Yeah, no, not straying too much from the other two councillors. I'm vehemently against this proposal. To my understanding, it was proposed in Toronto and Ottawa. And, what I see this as is the premier finding where he has friends and finding out where he can enact his most reactionary policies in municipal politics. He is clearly overreaching his power. And yeah, to echo what the other two candidates have said, this is making council redundant and it is destroying the democratic process. My goal in this election is to bring forward workers and poor and unhoused people into the democratic process, and imposing this strong mayor bill is slashing and just putting that down from the get-go. So yeah, against.
Okay, thank you very much. On to the next question, and they're starting to come into the chat. Thank you very much to the audience. Next question. How would candidates make Kingston a more sustainable city? So we'll start with Jeff, then Michael, then Jacob.
So sustainability has several different facets to it. There's financial sustainability, ecological sustainability. So with regards to both of those two, we need to prepare for a change in weather patterns. There'll probably be more derechos and probably more atmospheric rivers here that are going to be struggling or getting hit our infrastructure. So we're going to need to shore that up, usually with trees along the shoreline and anywhere else that erosion can happen. Financial sustainability also means that we need to be able to pay for the things that we are going to be buying. And if we can't do that, then that's not sustainable. So essentially, fiscal prudency and ecological prudency needs to be implemented. Actually, they are in many cases, but in the difficult part is to make sure that all new proposals meet at least those two criteria.
Okay, thank you. Michael and then Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll speak to the climate side of things because that kind of hasn't had the same platform time tonight. And I think one of the things we can look is by increasing or stacking the functions that our climate response initiatives have. So if we look at something like the city's tree canopy program, this has been an important, an important effort to increase carbon capture and things like that. But if we stack functions, we can do things like see trees as a way of reducing erosion, providing shade, especially in marginalized communities that tend to have less direct shade to protect walkers and kids from the summer heat. But we can also look at things like dense plantings of miniature diverse ecosystems through programs like the Little Forest, which accelerate the transition to mature forest, which helps to do more of our carbon capture. We're a small city, but we can make a big impact on the quality of life in Kingston and with regards to sustainability targets.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob, I guess, pardon me, I'm losing track of who along the way. So Jacob's next. Thank you.
Don't worry about it. Thanks. Yeah, no, in terms of sustainability, I mean, you'll hear me harp on housing and I'll keep doing it because it is the crux of our city, where housing is, where people are located, where they have access to resources. This is all extremely important, and retrofitting old buildings and looking forward to new sustainable energy models, like this is something we need to be doing. And in addition to that, if you go on to the People's Platform for Kingston website, you can see that we're proposing an expansion of Kingston public transportation, the bus system, and we're proposing to make it free. And there are other cities that have done this, and this is a huge thing for us because car dependency not only destroys our environment, but it destroys our roads, which we've been talking about. And if we can get everyone taking the bus through a system that will actually help people, be more accessible to the elderly and those who are disabled, then that is going to take a huge amount of carbon emissions out of Kingston. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we've all had all three on this one. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Will you commit to maintaining our municipal long-term care homes as public homes? And oppose contracting out the operation of the municipal long-term care homes for non-for-profit companies. And we'll go in the order this time of Jacob, then Michael, then Jeff.
Awesome. I'll kick us off. I have been and will always be vehemently against privatization projects of any kind. I'd like to consider myself something of a student of history, and if history in Canada and in America and in Europe has taught us anything, it's that privatization projects inevitably fail to account for the most vulnerable people in our country and in our city. And privatization does nothing but line the pockets of those who are already rich. So in short, yes, I will oppose privatization, and I will always support keeping long-term care homes public.
Okay, thank you very much. And we said Jacob, then Michael, then Jeff.
Thank you. I think when we look at the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic in long-term care, there was a clear discrepancy in the services offered between public and for-profit long-term care facilities in particular. So my emphasis is to protect those kinds of public services where we have them, to improve quality, while also considering prudent fiscal management. So in this case, to give the short answer, yes, I believe in the protection of these valuable public services.
Okay, and Jeff?
I'm most certainly against privatizing any of those public services. I'm against any type of privatization of anything that's necessary for life as we know it, anything that is needed in government. The only place that the market has a real place is for luxuries and non-necessities. Healthcare, in my opinion, is a necessity that should be run entirely publicly.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll reset and have a new question, and this one is going to go in the order of Michael, then Jeff, then Jacob. And the question is, it's a really local one here. Given the emphasis I'm hearing on affordable housing, will any of the candidates advocate for infill affordable housing units on Indian Road and elsewhere in our district? I take it all of you know where that is. So I said Michael, then Jacob, and then Jeff. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that one of the current projects that's on the books and actually has some shovels in the ground right across Princess Street from Strathcona Park is the 1316 development, which includes some affordable housing units. In terms of what's kind of on the docket, as a councillor, I would do my part to help promote the senior-friendly affordable housing units that have been discussed as part of the Providence Village, the future phases of the Providence Village development. I think that senior-focused affordable housing has been an oversight in our community planning around affordability. And I think we've got a great opportunity to work with a nonprofit partner to address that need within the district. Thank you.
And I think was Jacob and then Jeff, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I would advocate for any infill of affordable units. I would advocate for any affordable units if we are using rent geared to income to define affordable. In the 1316 Princess development, there are 10 rent geared to income units, and that's not enough. If we are planning on creating affordable living, we are focusing on rent geared to income. And if we're not focused on rent geared to income, then it will not have my support, period, full stop. Thanks.
Thank you. And last on this one?
I believe the question was referring to 2 Indian Road parkettes. So I am very much against taking park space away from the residents of any community. What I am in favor of is community or cooperative living where market rents can subsidize non-market rents. For that, you need a little bit bigger than a small parquet. 1316 Princess Street is an ideal size. It doesn't take up too much space. It does build up. It's along a transit corridor to support transit, and it's sustainable in the long run. It means that the rent geared to income and the affordable housing in there is subsidized by non-market or by market rents. What this also means is that you're mixing socioeconomic groups together. So you are not ghettoizing any one particular group. There's no gated communities here, and there's no ghettos of poor people that often have stigmatized places that go with them. So no to infill into parks, and yes to much more cooperative living programs. Modeled along Kingston Cooperative Homes, which is a success story. It's been 36 years in working, and they just paid off their mortgage, and they have people there who sometimes fall into needing affordable housing that is lower than market. And then when they are there, they have a way to survive in the hard time, and then they can go back to supporting those who are
Let's
longer
read
in the
what he
hard.
said. Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
but with that thing.
Well,
I
thank
think
you.
I guess I'm done.
Thank you very much. Just to explain to the people who are putting questions into the chat, thank you for all these questions. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that everybody's first question gets answered. So if you put a second, third, and fourth question in, we'll get to them as soon as we can. Okay, so here's a question from a new person. How do you see balancing the role of counselor in the stewardship and representation of our city in the age of truth and reconciliation? The recent removal of the Sir John A. Macdonald's statue from City Park springs to mind here in Kingston. So this one we're going to start with Jacob, then have Jeff, and then Michael.
Perfect, thank you. I think that in centering reconciliation, the city government and myself as a counselor, what I would support is the city doing something they have never done before, and that's letting the Indigenous communities that surround Kingston dictate to us what reconciliation is, instead of us standing on top of them and dictating down what reconciliation will be. I believe that with the Indigenous communities at the helm leading us through this process, we'll better be able to truly accept the actual history of our country. And from that moment, we can move from there to reconcile with the Indigenous community at the helm. I have personally written into our platform that I'm looking into communicating with Indigenous communities in the surrounding area to creating a museum and educational space in Kingston to teach that actual history, in which Kingston played a key role in the systematic extermination of Indigenous people. And I would like people from the community to come into that educational space, to come into that museum and teach the true history, and then teach how reconciliation can be centered from an Indigenous perspective. Thank you.
Great. I'll stop the watch and reset. And it was Jeff second and Michael third, this one? Okay.
Jacob is exactly right when he says that we need to listen to them. And from my listening to them, to their leaders, to their scholars in their books that they published, they want their land back, and they want the capacity to be self-governing. Anything that doesn't provide that is at best a distraction or a red herring that is not going to be helping them. So with regards to the Sir John A. statue, what would I propose? I'm suggesting that we do have a better understanding of history. What this means is that we need more perspective, not less. There are several groups out there that have such diametrically opposed perspectives that you cannot hammer them together and form a coherent narrative. It's akin to trying to put the perpetrator of an assault and the assault victim together and trying to come up with a joint statement. It doesn't work. That would be unjust. You need to have an authentic self-expression from whatever groups feel that they need to express Sir John A.'s legacy. That's what I've been arguing since 2017 in an op-ed in the Whig Standard. I know that in the past, about 1867, when Canada was founded, there were at least 4 groups that have not been represented properly. The Indigenous people, the Chinese who helped build the railway, and Blacks who were in Kingston. These groups, I believe, have a right to have their voices heard in addition to the other major group that was there that we've always had, our European heritage. These are perspectives that have, well, 3 of them at least are perspectives that we have not heard and that should be taught from their perspective, not meddled in, not dictated to by the white or the European dominant culture there. It should be entirely theirs. We should at least facilitate, since we're in the dominant culture, everything except the creative aspect of that. And we may not like some of the answers. Was that a stop with an hand?
That was the stop, but thank you very much for the statement. New question, I'm going to stop this thing, reset the clock. We've touched on this a little bit, but we talked the
There's
question.
one more person to answer.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much. Never hesitate to nudge the absent-minded professor. So Jacob, away you go.
Actually, sorry.
Michael, away you go. God, I've got to write these things down. I'm supposed to be doing it randomly, so and I'm getting too random here. Pardon me.
Well, thank you. I think this is an important question for all of us to take seriously, and I think that this is something where a consensus building approach is important. I don't believe that this is an issue where different, we should set up a process where we go into it assuming that different communities will dig in their heels. And I think that the legacy of separate but equal has very dangerous connotations within the legal and political history there. So I'll have to politely disagree with Mr. Mclaren on this one. I think that this is going to be an ongoing process and an ongoing conversation that council should look at more direct engagement with Indigenous community leaders through in discussions with advisory groups and appointment of elders and knowledge keepers when sensitive topics come up for debate, whether that's at council or at a city committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and my apologies, Michael, for inadvertently doing it. I'm writing down the random order now, and I'll tick through each of them. So in this next one, we'll start with Jeff, and then we will hear from Michael and Jacob. And the question is, and we've touched on it a little bit before in the sustainability discussion, what do you plan to do to address our climate emergency? So Jeff first, then Michael, then Jacob.
So the climate emergency has many, many facets. We've tried a lot of things that I voted for that were rejected by council, such as elimination of single-use straws or plastic straws, and keeping doors closed while air conditionings are blowing. It was not supported by many councillors. There are tons of these little projects that I think that can be continued on in the next term. But on a more general scale, or on a more general thing, we need to essentially plant more trees for all sorts of reasons. But the other thing that we also need to do is shore up our infrastructure. So for example, in the new climate change models, we have many more freeze and thaws during the winter. This wrecks our roads a lot faster. So we need micro resurfacing of pristine roads to keep them pristine. And that's one of the things that we've already implemented, and it needs to continue to work through. It is in fact the cheapest and most cost-effective way over the long term, but it does appear like many roads get neglected in the meantime. Other things that we need to do is with the trees is there's erosion happening along the shoreline. More trees there will protect that. There's also we have 273 kilometers of shoreline, so there's a lot to be done there. With regards to carbon capture, the honest thing that we need to do is go vegan, but I don't think we can actually force people to do that from the city. We need to eliminate our internal combustion engine. Again, something we can't really do from the city's perspective. That's at a higher level. But what the city can do is, within its own fleet, electrify the buses, electrify all our cars. And we're doing that as they come to the end of their life cycle. We are entering into contracts with more and more electric vehicles. We are
What does
trying to
that
cut
mean?
our emissions, and that's good.
Okay, sorry to cut you off. Okay, and Michael next, and then Jacob.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to pick up on a comment that I made earlier around little forests. So I think that this is a great example of a way that we can pivot an existing city program around expanding the tree canopy into a way that is more robust in attaining climate targets. This little forest program brings together a diverse ecosystem, and the symbiosis or the interaction between the different species that are planted at different heights can help to accelerate the transition into a mature forest system and thereby increase the carbon capture within that smaller plot of land. I think that we should do more to promote bus ridership. And really, this is about recapturing the momentum that we had before the pandemic. I gather that Jacob and I are both public transit users, and this is a good service, but it's costly. I think that we should be looking at low fare or no fare routes where appropriate. And then if alternative revenue streams are able to fund bus services so that it's fare free in general, then between an electrified transit service and fewer cars on the road, we're all going to be breathing much cleaner air. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Michael. Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm sure people have gathered, I am the core issue to my campaign and my platform's campaign is housing. And I want to stress that housing doesn't necessitate environmental destruction and the bulldozing of forests and wetlands. As I've mentioned, we need to repurpose the land and the space that we've already half developed or developed and then stopped. We need to develop that into affordable housing. So that's one way we can avert climate disaster. In part is changing the way that we think about building and repurposing housing. In addition to it, Michael just was speaking of transportation. As I stated at the very beginning, I believe in completely making free public transportation in Kingston by the bus and expanding these routes. This is something that have been done in many cities around the world, and it is a matter of will more than a matter of can or cannot. And as a result of these two things I have just mentioned, I believe that we will be able to meet the goal of cutting emissions by 50% by year 2030, which I believe was the number set out by the various climate activist groups in Kingston who just recently had a rally. And yeah, those are my two comments on the climate emergency.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll reset the clock here. New question.
But these people are what? Nothing? It's just this.
No, they're just.
Okay, and the question will go to Michael first, then Jacob, and then Jeff. And the question is, how would you make cycling as a mode of transportation safer and more accessible? And I didn't plant this one myself. So Michael?
Thank you very much. So I think that one of the successes that Kingston has had recently, because it is important to acknowledge these, it is the connection of different neighborhoods to the K&P Trail, the Cataraqui Trail, and this has provided a great place for people to cycle recreationally. Unfortunately, that doesn't help a lot of folks get to work, and potholes and other issues of debris on the side of streets make it difficult for people to bike safely. If you're constantly worried about, will I be able to find a route without cars whipping past me, and am I going to get a flat tire partway through my ride, then it's going to be difficult to make that active transportation choice on a daily basis. I would like to see multi-use pathways where permissible, because this allows that extra protection and safety for the biker, but also avoids the bollards, which I know have been a concern with a number of residents along Taylor Kidd Boulevard. So if we can look to more multi-use pathways to connect our city for daily commuting by bike, I think that can complement the existing success of the K&P Trail and other networks. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And Jacob, and then Jeff.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that I'm a biker myself. I'm a member at MTB at the farm in Kingston, and I do mostly gravel and mountain biking riding, but I love riding on the road as well. And through my aforementioned plan of expanding public transportation, which will certainly get single use or single family cars off the road, that will make space to expand both walking and biking lanes all over Kingston. And looking into shutting off more roads from cars or buses, period, is something that my platform has been very interested in. We've seen this done in cities around the world, and we see how it boosts morale, and it makes the carbon emissions go down, and it is a surefire way to have a happier, more sustainable city.
Great. Thank you for that answer. This is, now where are we going? Here's a question. The city is.
I believe I haven't had a chance to answer that.
Oh, Jeff, I'm terribly sorry. Yes, you're the third person on the list this time. Thank you.
So council has already passed the active transportation master plan. It's going to have a very linked and consistent pathways throughout the entire city. We have started with the easiest to do, and we are moving to the harder ones. The problem essentially is capacity for staffing to be able to get it done with all the other things that we have to do, and budget. But it is on the way. All the paths will be linked. The easiest ones first, the harder ones second. They will also be separated. But before we get to separation, there are different degrees of separation. There are easy separations, and then there are difficult ones. We are moving through that at every step of the way. And it will play itself out over the next several years. The integrated network will become more and more integrated. It will become more and more popular as it becomes more and more useful. But council took made the decision to do it in the fastest way possible, which meant that at first, some of them will not be connected, but they will be soon. The alternative would be to have one or two paths and none anywhere else. But we don't also want to get to the gold standard right away, because the gold standard we have found has also changed. Sometimes a purely separated bike lane adjacent to a road may not be the best thing. It might be through a park or through a more naturalized area. So as people's tastes change, we are also able to adapt that plan going forward. But we are doing the maximum amount as dictated by our budget and by the capacity of staff to get this done.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for missing a little earlier. And this is second last question, probably. The city's continuing to improve and extend our parks and other recreation areas. My family's enjoyed many of these great resources. And global warming, what do you think is a good priority for our development of parks and recreation? Are city maintained outdoor rinks feasible, or should other facilities be a priority? So order will be Jacob, Jeff, and Michael, and hopefully I remember everybody this time.
For sure. Great question. And if, maybe the pattern has been picked up upon, but my whole goal is to alleviate the cost of living crisis and alleviate the misery that is felt by a lot of Kingstonians by expanding public services focused on the people. And in that vein, I think the development of parks and recreational facilities is going to be essential to that project. If working class people and middle class people can have this time away from work where they can be with their families, where they can be with their kids, that is going to make for a happier Kingston overall. And, now having said that, I'm not going to support irresponsible wastes of energy, and I won't support the bulldozing of wetlands or forests or any developed environmental area, but I will 100% support the development and expansion of parks and recreational facilities if proposed in a sustainable manner. Yeah.
Great. And Jeff, you are next, and then Michael.
Thank you. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan will be updated during the next term. And that is the point at which we enter into it, things that people have asked for. So I've been hearing for splash pads, even small ones. We'll probably start with small ones in many different parks and expand them if the need is there. So that would be a summer kind of thing. The rink program has been very successful throughout the city, and anybody can ask for a new rink at any park anytime they want, as long as they have a volunteer group that will be willing to maintain it and shovel off the snow. So I've also heard for volleyball courts, in parks, or grass volleyball courts to be precise. These kind of things are the things that I've been hearing about, taking notes of, and when the appropriate time is there, putting them into the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That will make it happen, essentially, because staff are very professional at getting the things that council puts in there done.
Okay, that was not my horn cutting Jeff off. Michael, you have the last word on this issue.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, recreation and making sure that we have the best arrangement of recreation options is something that's important to make sure that we have a livable city. And just on the topic of outdoor rinks, you know, since the mid 2000s, I've been involved in one of the outdoor rink volunteer crews in Strathcona Park. And one of the things that we've noticed is that while there are pressures with climate change to shorten the season, you can actually get a shock cold that freezes a nice solid base for the outdoor rink. So if anyone on the call is worried about climate change posing an immediate end to outdoor rinks, there are good and bad effects to that. I think it's important that we look at meeting recreation needs, especially through neighborhood identified fit issues. In communities that don't have a community association, perhaps we can look at setting one of those up to foster that space for ideas to be shared. And while I do think that it's important for the city to develop kind of large system level plans, we've heard tonight that sometimes these take a little bit longer than are necessary. And as if we want to have a recreation offering that is nimble and able to adjust to the changing demographics, you know, moving from perhaps an open play area for kids to something more like pickleball, or from the soccer fields that we had at the old Hackett Park to perhaps a new dog park there. I think that an ongoing consultation with the neighborhood to look at the specific needs of the community at that time should be a priority, rather than making a plan and sticking to that despite the changing circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this question won't be the last one. But someone's clearly pandering to the moderator here. And the question was, if you could change one thing about our official plan and zoning rules, what would it be? Honest to goodness, this came from the audience. It's not me. And we're going to hear first from Jeff, then from Michael, and then from Jacob.
Thank you. So one of the things I've been hearing about is a lot of stable neighborhoods want to keep the identifiable characteristics of their neighborhood. So I'm proposing putting in sense of place criteria into the official plan, and it won't be going into the zoning bylaw because that's not where it goes. But if you put it into the official plan, it becomes easier to direct development along the nodes and corridors where it can support transit and keep particular neighborhoods the way that people expect that they should be when they move in there. The sense of place would give more credence, or would rebalance the values in the official plan in a way that sustains existing neighborhoods the way that the people there already like them. That's what I would essentially do, and it's already on my platform.
Okay, thank you. Second is Michael, and then Jacob.
Thank you. I'm going to take a little bit of liberty with the question to begin by saying that I would not introduce a sense of place policy because in other communities where we have seen NIMBY vetoes and similar policy instruments introduced, that is always to the detriment of the communities that need affordable housing, emergency shelters, and related services. We cannot allow the further stigmatization and underserving of these communities. What I would like to see, to turn to the positive, is greater mixed use in formerly low-rise commercial areas, especially where these are already on bus routes, but perhaps businesses have moved on to different areas of the city. Thank you.
Okay, And Jacob, you're up with the last word on this issue.
Yeah, I will echo Michael in saying I'm not going to support the sense of place, but what I will support is increased democratic representation of those who are living in communities, specifically those who have been left out of conversations before, the unhoused, the precariously housed, the working class. I want to bring their voices forward in creating these new policies. I want to bring them to the table because they have not been there before in Kingston. Thanks.
Okay. And our last question is the order in which it'll be answered will be Michael, then Jacob, then Jeff. How will you increase the diversity of city council in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity to better reflect our current and future population? So Michael, you're up first, then Jacob, then Jeff.
Thank you. Well, I have a very short answer to this one. I think I'm part of a generation that is typically underrepresented by age, but I don't help with the gender balance, and I don't help with the racial balance. And I think that it is important to recognize the room for growth that we have as a city there. I will do my part to be an ally and to create space, but the only place where I myself can help in terms of descriptive representation is around age. Thank you.
Okay, Jacob, and then Jeff.
Same with myself, white, male, and straight. I don't bring any of these things to the table myself, but those who are on the People's Platform of Kingston have various sexual orientations, racial identifications, religious identifications that they are bringing to the table. And our chief project in running for council as a group, as a coalition, was to bring a more democratic element to municipal politics in Kingston. And although we have a quote unquote democracy, not everyone's voice is brought to the table. That was our goal, to bring those unrepresented to the table as a group. Again, me, myself, I don't do that, but this was our goal as a coalition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And for a last word on this issue, Jeff Mclaren.
Council diversity, part of the reason that we have representation is so that the representative can represent the people that come to him or her. So the way I do that is by treating everybody equally, with equal dignity, because everybody has the equal dignity worthy of being represented and recognized. That is my goal, and that's been my plan, and that's what I've always treated when people come to see me, when people email me. I try and treat them each as they would like to be treated.
Okay. And we're a little bit over. We've answered almost all the questions. We've certainly answered questions from everybody who asked one, as far as I know. I'm very pleased with the level of engagement with the audience. Thank you so much for your questions, and to the candidates for their answers. And Christine has some final words on the way out.
Each candidate gets to take a couple of minutes to sum up.
Aha. So after the last question, each candidate gets 2 minutes for final remarks. And we're going to go in the reverse order that we started. So Jeff, and then Michael, and then Jacob.
Thank you. So the basics of my platform: more affordable housing, more affordable rents, more affordable tax levels. Community safety zones, we've passed that. They're going to be implemented no matter what. They're neighborhood wide, they're wide, and they're going to be enforced by the police. It's part of their strategic plan. They will be doing this. They've committed to that. Road maintenance, we need to increase the capacity of the city on this if we're going to do it at a faster rate. And I believe that we can, partly because we've grown so much. The tax base has grown so much. We have a lot more to play with. We did not increase the debt by any amount in the four previous years. We took out no new debt. So we are in an excellent financial position going into the next council. So climate change adaptation, we have a lot of assets that need to be protected from the new extreme weather phenomena that are coming, and doctor recruitment. We've had some success. We had a 3-year plan. It was 90% of it was succeeded with, or we were successful for in about 3 months or 4 months or so. I think we may need to do that. We also need to change the provincial funding formula. Additionally, we need to increase non-tax revenue strategies. We have a new grant strategy, which will be allowing this. That makes up about 1/3 of our budget. I think it can be made bigger. Clean city policies. A lot of people have also been concerned about the amount of garbage on the streets and in parks. Clean city policies can do that. There's also the quiet city policy. A lot of people want to get rid of the train whistles as they go by. They also want to silence loud modified mufflers and loud parties. So this is all part of that. The sense of place is in fact to help development along the nodes and corridors while not affecting or trying to protect the things that people value in their neighborhood. So physician recruitment is also another one. Equitable distribution of policing costs. And here I'm thinking about Queens. Queens often makes a big deal about how they try and pay for a little bit of the policing costs, but it's so tiny and they cause so much damage that they really should be paying a lot more than that. And they should also be housing a lot more of their students. And that's essentially it.
Well, thank you very much. So that was Jeff. We're now going to hear from Michael and then Jacob.
I just want to start by thanking again our moderator and the coalition for setting up this event. And so in my opening statement, I talked about the consensus building approach that I would take to address the big picture issues for the city. But that's not all the councillors do. With my final words, I want to talk about the importance of community connection. City Council is the closest level of government to our everyday life. When our representatives aren't part of the community, these everyday issues become neglected. We find examples of this in Meadowbrook-Strathcona, from the traffic light needs to allow safe left turns from Waterloo Drive onto Taylor Kidd, to the hazardous and broken sign at James Rowe Park, from the late night train whistles to the many residential speeding issues in our neighborhoods. I think that all of us recognize, it certainly came out tonight, the need for more affordable and available housing in our city as an overall priority for the next council. But I am the only candidate who lives in the district, and that means I'm the only candidate who experiences the same everyday issues that you do, and I can be our voice. Meadowbrook-Strathcona is where I grew up, and it's where Sarah and I want our children to grow up. This is my home, and I care about our future. That community connection is why I am here tonight, to earn your vote. And I think that's the same reason why a lot of you are either on this Zoom call or watching a replay on YouTube. If you would like to find out more information about me, my background, my priorities for the city, please visit my website at murphyforkingston.ca or get in touch. I'd be happy to hear from you about the issues that matter to you and your family. Let's work together to build a more livable Kingston. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Jacob Weinperl.
Yeah, thank you again for having us, and thank you, Dave, for moderating. I put my name forward in this election because the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis has gotten out of control, and the solutions that we've been shown are not to help those most marginalized by this crisis. They are, in fact, to help the biggest landlords and developers line their pockets. I want to make clear again, my coalition is made up of tenants and working class people who are here to serve tenants and working class people. We have no allegiance to anyone or anything else, and we will stay true to our course. Win or lose, we will stay true to our engagement in the community, forwarding our cause of working class and poor people's justice. Thank you.
Okay. So Christine, do you want to wrap things up or should I?
Go ahead, Dave. I'll just say thanks, everyone. I'll just type a friendly message in the chat. Thanks
And also in the chat, how to get more information on all the other all candidates meetings that the coalition is putting together. I want to thank, first of all, the candidates for coming and for having such thoughtful answers and sticking to the time and the format. And I'd like to thank you for tuning in, either immediately now over Zoom or in the YouTube that follows. And I want to thank the audience for the really good questions. We're going to give honorary urban planning degrees to most of you, and for some really good answers. And I want to thank the coalition for the work that they're doing across Kingston to encourage thoughtful debate around this municipal election. That will call it for a close tonight, and see you at the voting booths in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, everyone.